So I can say hello and welcome. I've got the great pleasure of knowing most of you, and I'm delighted that it's not all of you. It's great to have some new folks on the call. My name is Gretchen Rubinkin. I'm executive director of the quote unquote Boston chapter of BSLA, um, or the Boston chapter rather of ASLA. We call it BSLA, which is actually the Maine and Massachusetts chapter. Um, I'm going to go around. I'll skip Courtney. Um, and maybe let's see, Estelo, can we go to you and just pass it?
No.
Okay.
Stella
Um,
just posted something on the chat.
oh,
Can't,
sorry.
sorry,
Um,
can't get off mute right now, but Estella here from the city of Somerville,
sorry.
just curious about the process.
Thanks, Estelo. Sorry about that. I just caught the city tag. So with that, I'm going to go to Courtney, actually, from the city of Cambridge.
Hi,
Yeah.
yes, I'm Courtney Kirk from the city of Cambridge. And I think in general, as someone who works in the public sector, I think that's where I feel like there's maybe a lack of information about people being involved in this process. So that's where I would love to know more.
Cool. Welcome. Jack, are you able to say hi?
Sure. I'm Jack Sullivan. Uh recently retired professor of landscape architecture at the University of Maryland, and I am also the chair of the Fellows Committee at Maryland chapter of ASLA. So it was suggested, I didn't know anything about it until 2 days ago, and a friend said, you know what, we should do something like this. So that's what I'm here for, is to see if we should do something like this. See how you do it.
Awesome. Well, this, I'll confess, is the first time we've done something like this.
Okay,
Um,
well, that's a good start.
and I was having a conversation with our president-elect, Andrew Arbaugh, um, about a week ago, and he said, "This has always seemed opaque and mysterious to me." I'm like, yeah, I think probably to many people. And we have an open call for suggestions open right now. So we're like, all right, now's the time to do it. So, Jack, please ask questions and yeah, we'll,
Well, you've got a good success rate.
so we do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll talk a little bit about what our chapter process is, in a few minutes. So welcome.
thank you.
Um, actually, let's go Fellows Committee Chair to Fellows Committee Chair. Shauna.
Oh, that's me. Shauna Gillis Smith, uh, landscape architect. My practice is called Ground Inc., and I am the Fellows Committee Chair. Last year was my first year as chair, um, and it was actually an incredibly rewarding process. So we'll talk a little bit about it, about our process, but um, and not just from a success rate perspective. It was rewarding, the level of sort of depth and discovery of the different that we realized with the different candidates.
So we'll hear more from Shauna later. We'll hear more from Laura later as well. But Laura, would you start with just briefly introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Tenney. I'm a senior campus planner at MIT, so I'm in a non-traditional type of practice, much like Courtney and maybe Estello. So, and I just completed the nomination process with Shauna and Gretchen and others on the committee, and I'm thrilled to be a FASLA elect. So I'm just here to offer encouragement and whatever I can say from my side of the table as a candidate that would help people.
Cool.
Glad to be here.
Beth and Zoo, do you want to say hi? Or would you please say hi?
Oh, hi. Yeah, we're Beth and Zoo from Zen Associates, and we have been in this industry for Peter's been in it for 40 years, and so it's time that I think we try to do something deserving for him. So, want to look at the process and see how we get started.
Awesome.
And
Well,
then to see you all, a lot of familiar faces.
Yeah.
Since I tried kind of transition from public realm to private sector, I think it's also my responsibility to add the landscape practice in the residential realm.
that's great.
And so we have the practitioner who just next to me.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. Joe and then Danica.
Sure. Joe Blaylock. I am a landscape architect, but I'm serving right now as department chair of landscape architecture at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. And I'm also on the state board and on the committee for fellows. So just learning more.
Awesome. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Uh, I'm Danica. I'm the incoming president for the Indiana chapter and former BSLA member. And so I was just curious about the process because I am also on the Fellows Committee with Joe, and we're about to start the process. So just excited to learn more.
Cool. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go through a little bit of a slideshow and we'll definitely share this and post it. And once we get off of the slideshow, I'll put all the links in the chat as well. And the slideshow just tries to unpack the process very briefly at the national level and then what we're doing locally. And I'll try to spend about 5 or 10 minutes doing this, and then really the rest of the time is going to be, Shauna, Laura, and all of you in dialogue with each other. So, but let me start with this overview. And so here we go. And so here, can you all see the screen?
Yep, looks
Okay,
good.
great.
Yeah.
Yep, and as you can tell from the slide, this is the 2022 ASLA National Meeting when fellows are actually elevated per the lingo that takes place as one of the events that happens during the national conference. And so this year, Laura in our group here will be elevated during the Fellows Investiture Dinner in Los Angeles in September. And so, Laura, as you did very well, at this point, you're still Fellows elect because that happens, in this fancy setting. And you can see here, the Fellows have their green ribbon and the medal, and this is some of the folks from Boston who happened to be at the dinner that year. So I think, as much of this is taken from ASLA National's website, so I'm, trying to be very true to the process. It's among one of the highest honors. It is a national process, which the chapters plug into. It recognizes contributions to the profession and to the society based on works, leadership and management, knowledge, and service. And so there's these 4 different categories through which one can submit for fellow. The designation of fellow is conferred for exceptional accomplishments over a sustained period of time. And I want to emphasize that sustained period of time. Both Danica and Estelo, I'll call you out because you have been active as emerging professionals in our chapter. And I think we need to do more of this and getting folks to think about this early on in their career and coaching them on, earlier in their career to help set them up for fellowship later on, if that's something that they're interested in. And nationally, there have been, 1,593 fellows elected since ASLA began. Here's the folks who have been elevated from Boston since 2021. I'll note that these are not all of the candidates we've put forward. These are just the ones that have been successful over the past 5 or so years. The key website is here. If you haven't been here, go. ASLA.org/fellows will get you there. That's the Council of Fellows web page. And if you scroll down past the donate button, you get to other helpful links. We also have this on our own website under Becoming a Fellow. This is the basic foundation for fellowship, the essential eligibility requirements. You have to be a current full member or an international member in good standing, 10 plus continuous years of full membership. So student membership or associate membership doesn't count toward those 10 years. Contributions over an extended period, positive impact, and recognition from multiple sources. And we can talk a little bit more about, what might count as recognition or sources. The other thing I'll note, every year around this time, ASLA releases to the chapter leadership, so me as executive director and to our presidents, a list of people from our chapter who have those 10 continuous years of membership. We've found there to be some mistakes in the list or just some glitches in the list and just database issues or whatever. Or likewise, maybe somebody, didn't pay membership for a period and then came back in later. And so I would just say that not to be rude or call anyone out, just as a point of experience and awareness that if you think you have this, you've met this requirement or there's somebody in your chapter who you think has certainly been a member for that long, reach out to Kurt Millay, reach out to National and ask them. And if there's a missing year in there or something like that, they do allow payback to make that continuous, to make that continuous 10-year thing. But so these are the basic essential things. In our chapter, we have, about 150 people who meet this essential requirement. So that's still way too many people to submit in any given year or to nominate. How does someone become nominated? Technically or officially, there's 3 ways, but most come through the chapter executive committee. So most are nominated through their chapter. Members may recommend eligible candidates to their chapter for consideration. The chapters review nominees and select candidates to support through the process. And so it sounds like a bunch of you are involved in this, and this is by far the biggest way. And this is the process that we're in now. One might also be nominated through the ASLA Executive Committee or through the Council of Fellows Executive Committee. But people don't go in on their own. I think that's one point of awareness. So there is this interface with the chapters. So in our chapter, right, in Mass and Maine, how do we get from that 150 number of folks who meet those basic requirements to the handful that we do nominate in any given year? This is our process. We have an open call for suggestions. That's actually open now. It's been out in a newsletter. It'll go out in more newsletters, and we'll promote it on social media as well. I'll put a link into the chat to it. And this open call is something we started maybe 5 or 6 years ago now. Before that, it was purely the Fellows Nominating Committee who came up with the short list of nominees in any given year. And we decided to try to open that up to get beyond the folks who the nominating committee members might know and open up that call so that anyone can make a suggestion. And we do it so that truly anyone can make a suggestion. You don't have to be a member to make a suggestion. And the essential question is, who has impacted you? Who do you think has had this demonstrated impact over time? And so that open call is open now. Then our fellows nominating committee will meet. It's typically 3 meetings. We've tended to do this after Labor Day, but we're committed to starting earlier this year, next month. And the Fellows Nominating Committee has the task of creating that short list of 4 to 6 candidates. There is nothing magic, I should say, or nothing official about 4 to 6 candidates, and that's not a, official thing, but that's kind of where our Fellows Nominating Committee has decided that that's a kind of a good number. We would love, but don't imagine that, we'll get 50 candidates from Boston elevated in any given year. I exaggerate a bit, but at some point they'll say that's enough from this chapter. So, but likewise, we want to put forward a collection of nominees who reflect the diversity of our chapter in various means. So some small practices, some large practices, that there's as much of a balance of gender and ethnicity as we can, approach, type of work, like those sorts of things. And so we're not just nominating, a handful of big firm principals, so to speak. So we try to create a diverse shortlist, or the committee attempts to create a diverse shortlist of candidates. And then the next step is highlighted because it's like, I think this is our secret sauce, if you will, or the special sauce. The Fellows Nominating Committee members are paired with candidates so that each candidate has a coach and critic as they prepare their application. And I think that, perhaps Laura and Shauna will talk more about that as they go. But, Danica, if there's one piece of advice I can give to you as you're thinking about this process in your chapter, this is really something we've been doing the last like 5 or 6 years. I should say we've done it much longer, but it's really relied on one person. And now we do it, these responsibilities are shared with the members of the Fellows Nominating Committee. And I believe that it's super helpful as well as effective. And again, Laura and Shauna can talk more about that. There's usually a few rounds of critique and revision. And we try to be like really good critics, because we'd rather have those questions come up now than later on, right? When they're at national. And then finally, just to finish it off, the candidate shares a draft. The committee president ultimately is the one who signs off, prepares a statement, usually with Shauna and myself. In our chapter, we've also found it easiest to have me be the one who actually does the upload to the national system. And that national deadline for this upcoming cycle hasn't been announced yet, but it's usually in late January or early February.
So. Can I jump in with a couple things?
Yeah, go for it.
So the first thing that I want to say is, to a certain degree, Gretchen is actually our secret sauce because so you may not have that. We'll share all the other things about it, but Gretchen does. It's an incredible amount of work. It's an incredible amount of work by the candidates. The committee members work extremely hard, and Gretchen very much so. So I mainly want to talk a little bit about the importance of the story. But the first thing I want to talk about is this word, the open call for suggestions. So we talked about this last year because sometimes in order to nominate somebody, you have to write a paragraph or a page, or, and we went back and forth with this discussion about resumes. What do we ask for? But at a certain level, we want to keep it easy to suggest somebody because we want to keep it open. So if somebody has a great idea, but they have a great idea, but they're they don't want to put a huge amount of effort in or ask the candidate to put a huge amount of effort in to even get to the consideration table, you can just suggest the name. So that's what Gretchen has kind of sent out already. And it could be, it's better if it's a name and a little bit of information about the person, because ideally we're trying to get beyond the people that just the members on the committee know. And then the committee is working a little bit to begin with initially, like a super fast jury, where there's something about, we'll look at the range of candidates that we have that are eligible. We'll discuss, and the first 3 meetings are really reviewing the suggestions, coming up with suggestions, talking about the candidates, and then suggesting others, going back and then coming back again and doing the same process again until we've kind of whittled down to a group that we think are very strong candidates that year. There may be candidates that we think are extraordinary candidates, but they may be a better candidate in a year or two once they're sort of more in, let's say they've switched career paths slightly, and we want to give them a little bit of more time in their new role. So we'll say, in that case, we will say, we might put it off. And just because I think one of the things, Gretchen, that you didn't mention is if someone is put forth and they're not selected, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be selected again. A number of the people that Gretchen were showing that were on that photograph of the candidates elevated had applied more than one time. But the way that we also do it in our committee is that every year is a new committee and it's a new selection. So just because someone was proposed the prior year doesn't mean that they're automatically proposed the next year. So we're looking at all of the information every year. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was actually writing the story. And the reason I gave you a little bit of that history is because typically when the candidates are being discussed, there's something about them that intrigues the group or intrigues someone on the committee enough to really talk about, describe the characteristics of and the qualities of that candidate and why they feel that they should be a potential candidate for elevation. And it's and then when we're working together, so and I'm going to give you some examples of just the class from last year, but or the cohort from last year. But when we're working together, as Gretchen mentioned, we pair somebody with someone, and typically, we want to make a good pairing so that they're very, either they have a relationship or their professional skills tie in, and then you're really, you're the candidate is definitely taking the lead, but as critic and coach all the way through that process, and I actually will let Laura talk about that process a little bit more in depth, but I wanted to say that we as a committee tend to really focus on having a clear and distinctive narrative that really identifies someone as something unique and exceptional. And people may have most people have a broad range of exceptional skills, but we tend to find it more successful um, and actually kind of more interesting to really be pushing one quality of, or one characteristic of the candidate. So I'm just going to read a couple of from the 4 candidates that were elevated last year. I'm going to read a little excerpt from the summary letters that that were put together. And I will note that last year, when people typically think of the fellowship, often it's thinking of it in the design category. We had 1 in works category and 3 in leadership management. And again, I'll just give you a little excerpt. So John Grove, who's a principal at Reed Hildebrand, and I'm just going to read a few sentences from each. It's hard to underestimate John Grove's profound national impact as a designer. He has led the design of more than 80 projects by Reed Hildebrand and at other firms before that. Deeply devoted to the craft and practice of landscape architecture across a diverse array of expression, typology, and geography, John's work have garnered dozens of national and local awards. He creates landscapes that organize complex natural systems and cultural heritage into unique, immersive experiences of place. His technical excellence leads to deceptively simple landscapes of breathtaking beauty. That was the 1 in works. Then Jason Hallerdung, who is Vice President of Planning and Design at Tetra Tech, an engineering firm. And the other 3 were in leadership and management. To suggest that Jason is single-minded is an exaggeration, but laser-focused is not. Over the past 18 years, Jason's work has focused on the impact of climate change on the landscape and strategies of adaptation and mitigation. Through projects, public exhibitions, jurying competitions, authoring reports, writing policy, spearheading advocacy and educational activities, working directly with the community, with nonprofits, as a designer and principal in a landscape firm, and as a vice president of a giant global publicly traded corporation, the length and breadth of his leadership in climate resilience is impressive and, more importantly, impactful. And Walter Kudnowski did something extra, who's the founder and former president of the Conway School. Walter did something extraordinary. 54 years ago, he single-handedly launched a landscape architecture school unlike any other in the country. Driven by a belief in ecological principles as the basis of landscape planning, paired with the goal of immediate student empowerment, the Conway School was the first graduate program in the country entirely devoted to ecological landscape planning. The program was and still is organized around real-life projects. Over the past 5 decades, students have completed 1,453 projects, more since we wrote this, I expect, that have strengthened communities, conserved landscapes, and advanced climate resilience. Walt's vision and passion, his leadership and management, helped redefine our profession as a discipline grounded in stewardship, resilience, and the deepest respect to living systems. And then Laura Tenney, who, as she introduced herself, senior campus planner at MIT currently. Laura Tenney has elevated the role of university landscape architect to that of visionary steward, and has elevated the role of landscape architecture on multiple campuses to one that is worthy of the highest level of design through dozens of award-winning built projects. She is the institutional client that every landscape architect hopes for: inspired, passionate, detail-oriented, extremely hardworking, and rewarding to work with. When we think of design excellence, we typically default to the role of designer. Through Laura's leadership, it is her design and execution of the process that has resulted in so many extraordinary works. Her physical legacy at MIT, Harvard, Wellesley, and the Arnold Arboretum is astonishing. In addition, for the past decade, she's helped create and lead professional coalitions of landscape architects in similar campus roles across North America. So they sound like a pretty strong group. And they are exceptional, but I also want to emphasize that our process and the hard work that each of the candidates put in really, really helps. And I think by focusing on helping the candidate develop their story and their narrative, and realizing that it just is getting stronger and stronger with every sort of review, so typically it's the pairing, and then Gretchen and I also review, which can review the applications. Again, getting more eyes coming in from from a similar perspective that the national jury would be looking at these. So Laura, you want to add anything from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Shauna and Gretchen, for the introduction. I just want to say first, when I see myself up on that page that Gretchen showed with all the successful candidates for Boston from 2021, I still look at it and go, what am I doing there? Like with all these other amazing people. So I just would encourage everyone who's thinking about it to imagine yourself in as a possible candidate, because it wasn't something that I was looking to do, but then once I had the opportunity to do it, only because I wasn't really, it was an opaque process to me in the sense that I really thought of it as more for people in works, and I was aware of the other leadership and management service and knowledge, but I didn't know as much about them. So for me, what Shauna says about, telling your story, I think was really that was key for me, telling your story and telling the impact of the type of work that you do, both on the profession and on the public. Those are really the key parts for me. And it was a great opportunity to reflect back on my own career and really think about, what is my story and what is that kind of thematic line that runs through it, and what's the impact I've had. So, and I would also say that 3 months from the time, sort of November 1st to February 1st or so, when we had to work on it, was intense. So I set aside, Christmas vacation and the holidays and all of that to work hard on this. And the support that I got from BSLA and the nominating committee and Gretchen was just fantastic. And the critics are really, it is, in some ways it's like going back to pinups again. You're there and you just like don't get defensive. The criticism is direct and honest and so helpful. So if you just like, I just tried to be open-minded about it and to hear it all and realize like the goal of this is to make me and a stronger candidate, and to make successful cohort of candidates from Boston. So I really appreciated the feedback that I got. And I can remember writing the first draft and thinking like, this feels pretty good. I'm like, maybe I'm 75% of the way there. And the first meeting with Shauna and my other coach and with Gretchen was like, oh, back to the drawing board. Like I had so far to go from there. And so I think, just to know that it's going to be a lot of work and it does take a while to figure out what that storyline is and to tell it. It's not a chronology or a list of, works or sort of achievements. It really is teasing out that narrative and what your impact has been across the profession.
The words of Tom Ryan, it's the hardest I've ever worked for an F in my life.
Yes, agreed.
Should we just see if anyone has questions at this point? Or?
Yeah, let's do that. I have other resources and I can put them in the chat and we can go back to slides if you want, but let's let it be driven by your questions. That's really
More people are forming questions. I'll also say that, sometimes candidates are really interested and, and approach. People can still suggest themselves as suggestions. There's no question about that. But sometimes people aren't even necessarily thinking about it until someone from the committee reaches out and says, might you be interested in this? So, but I do think it's really important to recognize that it is a lot of work, because sometimes when there's not as much work put in, you can tell actually. It just doesn't, it's not, and maybe we're overly direct, but that's just a
No,
personality.
I
So
think it was great. And it was a lot of rounds of revision and a lot of iterating and a lot of, putting up images and saying, that's not helping your story, so really strengthening that kind of main theme or two, and then separating the wheat from the chaff. I think someone mentioned that it took me a while to be able to do that, and having those critics who have just have that experience of, gone through it themselves and have seen a broader array of candidates and know what the national jury might be looking for is incredibly helpful. I feel sure that I would not have had that same level of preparation or, that my nomination would have not been anywhere near the same level if I hadn't gone through the BSLE process.
And Laura, I'm pretty sure that you're one of the folks who you could have totally cool to self-nominate, but you didn't self-nominate. You were one
That's
who
right.
name came up during the committee conversations and you were approached.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember walking the dog and having a
Yeah.
conversation
Yes.
with you
And I remember saying,
about have you considered?
did you call the right number? Are you talking to
Yeah.
me? Yeah.
Would you consider? I see Danica has her hand up, and I'm going to go to her in a minute. But before I do, let me just prompt this question to you. Because I think that for works, it might be more straightforward. Thinking about John Grove and Reed Hildebrand, for instance, and we can, think about that extraordinary portfolio that Reed Hildebrand has, and they are a firm that does go for design awards and so forth. And so there's that a body of work, literally work, that portfolio that John has to lean on. After Danica, I'll come back to you and ask if you could speak for a second about your work at MIT, because maybe, kind of looking at Courtney, looking at Estelo on the screen, like folks who are in the public sector or in different kinds of roles, you're Reed Hildebrand has award-winning work on your campus.
Yes.
But
yes.
So what was in your application?
Sure.
Danica, well, Laura's thinking about that.
Okay, I was going to say, if you wanted to answer that, I'd be super curious to hear the answer. But thanks for the conversation so far. It's been really enlightening. I have several questions. I think I'll start with for your fellows committee and those paired critics. I think that's such an interesting way to do it. Are those critics all successful fellows candidates, like folks that have gotten elevated, and are they being paired? I'm just thinking right now in our committee, majority of us are not fellows. So to have that insight into the process when giving feedback would be helpful. So that's my first question.
Yeah, cool. So it was actually, I'll give a shout out to Kaki Martin, past president. It was during Kaki's presidential term that we really built out the fellows nominating committee, which had been much smaller for a while. And so it's around about 7 people-ish. And putting people on staggered 3-year terms. So this past year, that group, this is the group that's in the chat: Michael Boucher, Lisa Cowan, Deneen, Crosby, Doug Jones from LeBlanc Jones, Laura Solano from MBBA, Bob Ulig, Glenn Valentine, and Shauna as chair. And at this point, they are all fellows. This hasn't always been the case, but as again, in this current era, we do have all fellows on this on the committee. And this upcoming year, let's see, on those staggered terms, Laura Solano cycling off, Michael Boucher has cycled off, Mark Klopfer is joining, Gina Ford is joining the committee. And then we also, Danica, have a few folks out there who are like, don't talk to me about a committee. I don't want to be on a committee. But I'm happy to, take a look at an application and have a Zoom call with somebody and critique it. And so I'll give a great shout out to Skip Burke. Skip has served in this capacity for a number of years now, where he again is not officially on the committee, but is willing to serve as a on-call basis, as a critic during that coaching period. So
and then when we were
I found it to be a great way to kind of tap into some of the senior leadership that's out there, who might not be as active in other activities of the chapter right now.
And sometimes it depends how many candidates are put forth. If there's more committee members than there are candidates, it's sometimes nice to have, sometimes a couple people might comment on a few different applications. I in terms of picking who was paired with what, it was really just a case of who did we think was sort of the best match in terms of the skill, personality, background. And that was just a, you know, flavor choice, but I think it was good. For example, um, can I use your example, Laura?
Sure.
Um, Glenn Valentine, who is had worked with Laura in the past, and had been the one who had suggested her originally to the committee. Seemed a very good pair, and they worked extremely well together.
We did. Yeah. Yeah, and it was a benefit to having a few different points of view. So, I would say having Glenn was sort of my consistent mentor and coach, but I also had meetings with Shauna and Gretchen. And I even had another person who's more of a lay person reading my text and providing some comments on it. That was, a sort of a colleague and friend. I had thought about asking, other people offered to help in the beginning, and then I quickly realized this is a lot of feedback, and I can't throw my net too wide. I actually need more sort of intense level feedback from the people who've been assigned to work with me through the committee, and maybe one other person, with sort of a different point of view. But the process was really fabulous, and having a consistent voice, but a couple of different people to look at it and provide, like any studio critics, people come with their different perspectives and experience, and that was really helpful too. So you weren't just hearing one person's point of view.
Yeah, and I think that's important that the committee members also have to be open to, you not taking my advice, for example.
Yeah, but listening to the advice and thinking seriously about it is really important, because it did, it caused me to sort of meander a little bit and try this and try that, and gradually the story started to gel. My story started to gel, but it took me a while, and I would say the first couple of months I was really still pretty heavily, revising and going back, not back to square one, but a big revision and then rethinking it. And then as we got closer to the end, I was tweaking, but I was still tweaking right up until the last minute, and then it was pencils down and Gretchen uploaded. So there were
So
sort of different phases, but
sorry, I'll just say one thing and then
yeah,
just because just on the makeup of the committee. So last year, one of the things we realized is that we didn't have someone in academia on our committee. So that's why Mark just retired from Wentworth, but he had just recently retired from Wentworth. So that was one of the reasons we approached Mark Klopford. So we want there to be kind of a range of perspectives on the committee as well.
all right. Did you want me to address the prior question about working? I see Courtney's got a hand up, so I'm happy to do either.
Let's go with Courtney first. And
Sounds good.
yeah.
Thanks. This is great. I'm glad you guys are doing this. And I guess my question is more around I understand the 10 years of service, um, and curious to know if like factors are maybe swaying things if someone's super active in ASLA or they've been a chapter president, like those sorts of things. I think there's a perception that like that's a must.
Richard, do you want to answer this? It's not 10 years of service, right? It's 10 years of
It's
membership.
10 years of membership. So I'm going to emphasize that. Like, it definitely helps for sure, right? Some activity in the chapter, and there are folks who have been elevated recently, like Ricardo, for whom, he's a past president, he's a trustee, like he's served various roles in the chapter. And for Ricardo, that was part of his story as we were nominating him. But John Grove, frankly, hasn't been all that involved in the chapter. Walt formed the Conway School. I mean, he has a degree in landscape architecture. He's been a member of ASLA since like 1965. But he has not, the world of ecological design and the world of like ASLA landscape architecture have been pretty separated for a lot of that time. Like he definitely has not been a leader within the chapter specifically. Within the larger world, yes, for sure. He's founded a school. Um, but so yeah, I think it helps definitely. But it's not a requirement at all. And Mish, you have your hand up. Yeah, chapter president, Michelle Crowley, please.
Yeah.
I cannot find how to raise my hand, which seems very strange in 2026. Danica, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this, but which chapter are you from?
I'm with the Indiana chapter and on the Fellows Committee.
Okay. Because I have a question for Shauna and Laura, but it ties into when I was I'm Danica, I'm currently the chapter president here. And when we were in one of our meetings at ASLA, there was a topic that came up about so many chapters are having a hard time finding fellows because of how much work it is and being able to take that time. I mean, if you are, say you aren't John Grove and have the backing of your marketing person to really help you through this. I mean, of course, it's all of the work and the mental part, but yeah, there's a big difference between having that backing versus Laura Tenney on here who did, worked her tail off on this whole thing, right? So it's a very scary proposition for a lot of people. And one of the chapters, this was a couple years ago, but one of the chapters actually hired a writer so that they would select people, and most people were like, I don't have the time, I can't do it. They actually, the chapter paid for a writer to really interview them and actually do all of the writing and doing this application. So it was really, I thought that was great because I think it was, and hearing today from Shauna and Laura, it's rather scary and daunting to go through this. And when you hear it's like Labor Day to January is like a crunch time for so many people if you've got kids or if it's anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there as something that we heard at ASLA, which I thought was great because not everybody can kind of pull this off. And so I just wanted to add that.
Yes, it's definitely a lot of work and a lot of time, but it's also just a lot of thinking. But we are, I think last time, the reason we're shifting things a little bit earlier and starting in the summer is so that because we didn't actually start. When were you approached, Laura? It was end of November, right?
Well, yeah, it was November before I think it was like Thanksgiving before I could really start work in earnest. So
yeah,
sometime in November.
I think maybe November, end of October. So people actually found out at a pretty bad time because they had Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. So that's why we're kind of pushing it. The committee is going to start meeting, have our first meeting in the summer so people can actually get going, end of September, beginning of October.
That's
so
great.
So it can be spread out because part of the problem was that it was just, holiday conflicts as well, plus a very compressed time frame.
Yeah, I'm someone who appreciated the deadline pressure. And I don't have kids living at home now, so like I kind of said I'm going to take my holidays and do this for myself. And I will say the self-reflection period was really valuable, and regardless of how the nomination would have turned out, I mean, it gave me the moment to kind of reflect back on my my career and my, the path that I had taken, and it was really gratifying from that point of view.
But that point is it's a good point, Michelle, and or Mish, and we should talk about it. ChatGPT too is sort of in the picture as well
Well,
with
yeah,
the
and that wasn't out when this was talked about at ASLA,
Yeah,
or it wasn't trending.
yeah,
we found ChatGPT this year, and different people used it to different extents. It was a helpful first draft.
sometimes, yeah, or parts of
Sometimes
it
it
were,
helped.
yeah,
Parts of it were helpful first draft. And then parts of it, you're actually like you take a quick look, quick read, and you're like, this is awesome. And then you're like, wait a second. And it
yeah,
really took kind of the humanness of getting into the details and refining it to make it sing, I think. Would it be helpful to take a look at a quick applic thing, like what this thing actually even looks like?
yeah.
One of the
Well,
things
probably people have.
that's Um, and I want to make sure we address residential too, for a moment, but here just a super quick screen share of what these applications look like. So if you haven't seen it, there's a very strict template that ASLA requires, which is a beast to wrestle with. Just to get stuff aligned, but I will say it's also a blessing in disguise because it really forces everything into this format and it doesn't make the application a giant design process for you. Everybody is using the same thing, so it really can become about the story and about who you are. And so there's a 5-page written piece, and we've got Laura's on the screen here. And so that narrative is going in the bulk of the text and running in the sidebars is really her resume. It's lists, it's lists. This is one of those places where you're demonstrating impact. And so maybe it's a list of design awards if you're going in works. Maybe it's here for Laura, she's going in leadership and management, and so we're putting the professional leadership activities there. She chaired this committee or was an officer on that committee or juror for SCUP, or other sorts of things. And so that's this 5 pages of things. And in this case, actually, there's some design awards here credited, right? This one was won by Stimson. This one was won by Reed Hildebrand, Hargraves. But these are projects that Laura managed in her role that were award-winning work. And so I'm flagging that actually, Courtney, it looks like Estella has hopped off, but for those, like, you have in your leadership capacity at City of Cambridge, there's extraordinary work that's happening kind of under your guidance. And so this is one way that that can fit in.
Oh, and actually, I also do want to say that that was kind of central, one of the central tenets of Laura's application was that designing the process and overseeing that process was a significant contributor to the success. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary when you see how many how many of these projects that under Laura's oversight were designed by people who were actually elevated to fellowship, but even many of them hadn't been elevated to fellowship when they were working directly for her.
And then, yeah, so this is just scrolling through that PDF, and ending with the summary by the chapter president. So here's Misha's signature of signing off on that. And as Shauna was reading excerpts from these, we really tried to tailor these to the larger story that each candidate was telling in their application. And so no matter what category you're applying to or one is applying to, there's a document that looks like this, a strict 5-page limit on that. And then for Laura, so in the last few years now, all categories can submit a slideshow. For works, it's 20 images. For everybody else, it's up to 10. That's images, not slides. And so you cannot pack a screen with, if you pack a screen with 5 different images, it counts as 5. So this too, I think is for folks who are used to designing presentations, it can feel very restrictive, but I also think it's a really important tool here. So for Laura, it's, identifying some of this area at MIT, projects that you've managed over time. Again, Courtney, looking at you with a map of the city of Cambridge. But these are, when we're talking about Laura's collective impact, um, it's right there. Like, um, and here are some of those specific works. Again, doing things that try to emphasize the larger story of, in this case, the landscape at MIT. You being you, there's one, not a dozen, but one picture of you, engaging students around things. And then some earlier work in here as well as we're creating that story, or you're telling that story over time. To Courtney's point, yes, here's like Laura on stage at an ASLA conference. I would say actually what's important here is not so much the ASLA logo on here, but what I want to emphasize is that it's demonstrating that you're not only doing this work internal to your organization or your company, but you're sharing it with the larger industry, the larger, the region, the whatever it is. You're being extroverted about what you're doing. And I think that, being extroverted, um, yes, like sign up and apply to present at, whatever conference or committee. Doesn't have to be ASLA here, but something about that, getting the work beyond just your internal company is important. So that's one
I
example of a
I
slideshow.
apologize, but I have to jump off too. And Danica, I know that I don't know we have metrics on how many people applied once and then applied again the next year. I think it's like many the design applications. The jury, our committee is different, but the fellowship committee is different every year. And I think also given the time to kind of reflect further on it, I think people have generally revised their application, right? Gretchen, when they've,
Yeah.
and whether it's that year or a few years later, there may have been things that, Matthew Cunningham held off for a couple of years because he wanted to be applying it at a time that was more beneficial after he'd applied to begin with. So I don't think there's a particular success rate of the second year.
I have one
Yeah.
more question, but and it's more about or maybe you talked about it, but references, and
We didn't. I have to jump. It is really important.
yeah.
But
Yeah, and I'm happy
Gretchen
to
and
hang
Laura
out
can.
here
Bye,
as
Shauna.
long as you want.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Shauna.
Bye, Shauna. Thanks.
They're called testimonials in the lingo. And actually, if I pull up Laura's example again, I'll show you where they come in. And so it's 75 words maximum, and they show up either in like little sidebars here, um, or just because that template was such a bear. um, in this past year, ASLA has said they can show up here at the end. And so it's up to 4 testimonials. Um, yeah.
I've heard that some people get a lot more than 4, and then is it the committee that chooses the 4, or?
No, I mean it's like ultimately the candidate is responsible for their
I
application.
got more
We
than 4.
we
Yeah.
definitely recommend that a candidate will seek more than 4, because somebody's going to have life happen and not,
Mm-hmm.
not, or somebody will be, chronically late on deadlines or whatever, or somebody like it just doesn't sing or just is, it doesn't, perhaps it's very redundant of a different one, like whatever, to be able to choose from a few, is helpful.
Yeah, I had at least one extra, and then at least one of these, I knew the person well enough that they gave me a first version, and then I said, could you, because I was trying to each one to hit like a slightly different point, I said, could you just, and we talked about just sort of changing it slightly. And then some people will give you more than 75 words, and it's up to you to figure out how to meet their intent but get it down to 75 words. And if it's enough changed, I send it back to the person and say, does this still look okay to you? So that took some time as well.
And you can see here with Laura's, there's a few recognizable names in here. A few fellows. Yeah, it's getting into the headspace of this. Part of this game is about the club. And, if I'll say, it's kind of like, welcome to the club. Yes, we think Laura should be a fellow here. You have Byron here, who's from Arizona State, so there's some geographic diversity here, so it's not only Boston people saying yes. In this case, you have the executive vice president of MIT. So, for somebody else, maybe it's a longtime client or, a longtime collaborator, like an architect that you've worked with over time. They don't all need to be landscape architects, is what I'm trying to say. So, and they don't all need to be star names. Sure, like it does help to have somebody in there who's recognizable, or who's, has a national profile, but they don't all need to have that by any means. So, Mish, does that answer?
Yep. I just wanted to make sure we touched on that.
And unlike some other processes here, this can come to you in the body of an email. They can voice text it, like send it as a, whatever, send it as a voice text, quite literally, and then you just transcribe it. It all gets incorporated into this 5-page document. So there's some other processes where it needs to be a blind process on letterhead, like all the things. No, this is really all like feeding into your package and all part of celebrating that story you're trying to tell.
I have to jump off, but thank you. That was very informative. Good to see all of you.
Thanks, Mish, for hosting us.
Yeah.
Yep, sure.
Thank you, Mish.
Host and leader. Bye.
Yeah.
I have to run off too. But I did want to say that the idea of hiring somebody to help you write your nomination can be really beneficial. I don't think landscape architects they're too humble. And you need somebody else to tell you just how terrific you are. It makes a big difference. Anyhow, this has been really great. We're going to do this with our chapter as well, and probably have to do it in the next couple of months.
That's literally where I had put that like July 15th deadline on the call for suggestions. So we're like, oh, okay, we got to do this now.
Yeah.
But Jack, I want to underscore what you said about being humble, because I think that's also a really important point. Like, it is uncomfortable for most, I would say, within the profession of landscape architecture to be saying, I'm so wonderful. These are all the ways that I have been extraordinary for the last 10, 20, 50 years. I mean, that's incredibly awkward.
That takes a few rounds to shake that out of your system. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And that's something where it also helps, like as we're coaching candidates, it's I think
So I
helpful
want
for us to be like, no, Laura, you have had this impact
so
here.
I wanted to ask you though, we make a point of not telling anybody that
Correct.
they're going up for fellow in case they
Oh,
don't get it.
oh.
So I'm wondering, how do you get so many people involved in this process and not keep it quiet? Because it can be embarrassing if somebody knows that you went up and you didn't get it. So
Abs
we try to avoid that.
yeah, yes, yeah, very definitely. With one exception, all the names that we've used today are folks. Actually, yeah, no, in every case, the names we've used are all folks who have been successful. So
Correct.
I never publish who our unsuccessful candidates
No, I
are.
don't mean publishing. I just mean word of mouth, because the idea there are some people who have gone up more than once and have not succeeded.
Yeah.
And as some people had said, if you don't take my advice, that's your fault. But and then not my advice, but other people's advice. And I'm just, like the idea of going up for works instead of leadership can be a real bad choice. Because if you think you're a great designer and nobody thinks the same, you're probably more successful. You might be more successful at the management leadership.
Well, and Works tends to really lean into a lot of awards and having, design awards serve as a proxy for that, like
Correct. Yeah.
recognition, and national design awards and that can become tough to do. We've certainly had some so I'll touch on a few different things there. Like we've had some candidates who the committee has said, you should, we think you'd be great in this category, or you think your candidacy would be strong in this category. And the candidate really wants to submit in a different category. Ultimately, it's their decision because
Yeah.
it's their thing. There is a box that one checks in the upload to national where you can say, it is okay for this candidate to be changed into a different category. So if the fellows evaluation committee at the national level thinks that this candidate is awesome, but they should be elevated in a different category, you can check the box that enables
Yeah.
them to change that. So I don't know how often that change happens among that fellows committee. I expect there too, every jury is different.
Yeah.
But there is that option
Right.
there.
Well, thank
Gretchen,
you. Thanks for this.
I
Appreciate
apologize.
it.
I'm gonna have to run in a minute here too to get to a different meeting, but you know where to find me, and I'm happy to take any follow-up questions from any of the panelists or attendees.
Awesome.
I think
Thanks,
this was great.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Great to see you all.
great to see you all as well. Gretchen, would it be possible to get the slides you shared at the start of the call?
Absolutely. Let me stop the recording by saying that. We'll share the
Yes.
slides.
Well, thanks again for